Hello, I'm Alan, and welcome to today's edition of Alan's Biking Adventures. For those of you who watched last week's edition, the scenery on today's edition is going to look familiar. That's because I have 6 days to go until the Gran Fondo, and my training plan once again calls for a 75-mile route. So I'm going to ride the same route as I rode last week, but I did make some changes. For those of you who watched last week's edition, you know that it was a difficult ride for me. Well, I think my main problem on last week's ride was that I ran out of water and I had no electrolytes with me. So for this week's edition, I've got about 40 ounces more water on me, and I've also got some electrolyte tablets which I can drop in my water bottle. I also have a couple extra gels, although that's more to share with anybody that I might encounter if I encounter a cyclist who's having trouble. Sort of an inspiration from last week's edition, the Good Samaritan who saved me last week. I want to be able to pay it forward. Well, for those, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and click the subscribe button. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or ideas for future editions of Alan's Biking Adventures, be sure to leave them in the comments below. Well, without further ado, let's ride. Before I tell you about all the statistics of today's ride, I want to tell you a little bit about today's ride. You may remember last week was a sufferfest. This was the same route, more or less, but it wasn't a sufferfest today. Why, you may ask? Well, I was a lot better prepared than I was last week. I guess the distance, being the longest distance I had ridden self-supported before, I thought I had enough water last week, and I wasn't even close. So this week, I said in the intro that I brought 40 ounces extra of water. It was actually an extra 56 ounces of water. You see, I had a 24-ounce water bottle on the frame of my bike. I also had two 16-ounce bottles in the back outside pocket of my Camelback. And of course, the Camelback itself holds 100 ounces. So in total, I had 156 ounces of water with me. That was, of course, in addition to my usual multi-tool, tire levers, spare tubes. I always carry 2 spare tubes with me because you never know what might happen on a ride. So I had quite a bit of weight with me, but it was well worth it. In addition to the water, I also had a tube of Noon Sport with me. I had dropped one into the 24-ounce water bottle at the start of the ride, and then every 30 miles or so, I stopped and poured one of the 16-ounce bottles of water into my water bottle that was on the frame in the bottle cage, and dropped another Noon tablet into it so that I had plenty of electrolytes for today's ride. The other piece of the puzzle, of course, was it was about 20 degrees cooler today than it was last week. Speaking of the weather, that leads me right into the statistics for today's ride. I didn't make note of what the wind was at the start of the ride, but it wasn't that significant, maybe 4 to 6 miles per hour. I don't remember what direction it was out of. The temperature at the start was about 63 degrees, and it got up to about 76 degrees during the ride. The length of today's ride was 78.55 miles, with a total elevation gain of 3,852 feet. There were 6 major climbs on today's ride. The first one was 0.88 miles in length with a vertical gain of 138 feet and an average gradient of 2%. The second climb was 0.55 miles in length with an elevation gain of 174 feet and an average gradient of 6%. The third major climb was 0.91 miles in length with an elevation gain of 338 feet and an average gradient of 7%. The fourth climb was 0.71 miles in length with an elevation gain of 266 feet and an average gradient of 7%. The fifth climb was a long one but a mild one. It was 1.31 miles in length with an elevation gain of only 210 feet for an average gradient of 3%. And the sixth and final climb was 0.44 miles in length with an elevation gain of 148 feet and an average gradient of 6%. My average moving speed on today's ride was 16.2 miles per hour. My maximum speed was 34.9 miles per hour. My average heart rate was 133 beats per minute, with a max heart rate of 157 beats per minute. I burned about 1,858 calories and had an average power output of 129 watts. In terms of where I rode, and I do apologize, I forgot to give you this information last week. Of course, I started out in Garwood, New Jersey, and the entire ride was in New Jersey. From Garwood, I went through Westfield, Mountainside, Springfield, Millburn, Short Hills. Then I went up north through the South Mountain Reservation into West Orange, Verona, Cedar Grove, North Caldwell, Wayne, Lincoln Park, Pequannock Township, Pompton Plains, Riverdale, Bloomingdale, Butler, West Milford Township, Macoupin, Kinnelon, Boonton Township, Denville, Morris Plains, Morristown, Madison, Chatham, Summit, then through the Watchung Reservation into Westfield and back to Garwood. I am excited about next week's ride. It's going to be a tough one, but I think I'm up for the challenge, given how much easier. Now, today's ride wasn't easy, but it was significantly easier than the same ride last week. And so I think I should be in pretty decent shape for the Gran Fondo next week, which is only 77 miles, but with over 5,000 feet of elevation gain. So, could be interesting. Anyway, as I said, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or ideas, if there's anything you'd like to hear me talk about during the narration of my rides, leave it in the comments below. I do read all of my comments. And I'll let you enjoy the rest of the ride. At this point, it looks like I'm riding through Denville. And from Denville, of course, I went south into Morris Plains. And you know the rest because I already read it off. Well, enjoy the rest of the ride, and I'll catch you at the end. Wow, that was so much better than last week. What a difference proper hydration makes. Not to mention it was about 20 degrees cooler today than it was last week. Anyway, that was a great ride, and I feel confident for next week's event, which I will be posting on my YouTube channel. It's going to be the Gran Fondo Hincapie, Lehigh Valley. So stay tuned for that. That's it for now. And until next time, stay safe out there.